receive a warm greeting. Today, my group and I are going to explain a work from my formative thesis titled Effect of Consuming Iron-Rich Foods on Reducing Anemia in Children Aged 3 to 5 in Villa San Isidro 2025. The authors, speaking Arriaga Tejada, Jorge David,
Prestelneira, Lucero Marilady, Sánchez Morán, Roberto Carlos, Tejada Palomino, Giovanna Miren.
In our problematic reality, we find that child anemia
resulting from iron deficiency affects more than 60% of children under 5 years old in Villa San Isidro, negatively impacting their cognitive and physical development due to the low and irregular intake of iron-rich foods. General problem is the intake of iron-rich foods effective in reducing anemia in children under 5 years old in Villa San Isidro during the year 2025? General objective to determine the impact of food intake on the reduction of anemia in the child population. General hypothesis that the regular consumption of foods that provide iron to the body, especially liver and red meats, legumes, and fortified foods, was associated with a lower level of anemia incidence in Villa San Isidro in the year 2025. As specific problems, we have two: which iron-rich foods are consumed most frequently and the hemoglobin levels. What is the relationship between the consumption of iron-rich foods and hemoglobin levels? The specific objectives are four, which are: identify the frequency of anemia in this age group in Villa San Isidro, describe the intake of iron-rich foods in the population, establish the relationship between the frequency of intake of these foods and hemoglobin levels, propose recommendations aimed at strengthening local strategies for anemia prevention.
Now I will explain the theoretical contribution of interruption, which is reduced to three theories, which are the three most important theories we found in our report or formative research report.
As in which the following points would be: who is the author, the date it was published, title of the research, theoretical contribution, and where it is published. The first theory we find is by Tokomura and Mejia, which was published in 2023, and this is an article. The title of the research is Childhood Anemia in Peru and in the Pending Issues. The theoretical contribution discusses childhood anemia in children, which not only depends on nutrition, but also on the education of the parents, the economy, and the place where they live. Where is it published? It is published in a Heridian medical journal. Moving on to the next theory, we find Nike Apolinario. This was published in 2021 and is a thesis. Risk factors associated with title of the research, risk factors associated with ANE, anemia in children under 5 years old attended at the Fatima Pate Health Center. For the Osapampa case, Onipabesoe 2020. The theoretical contribution we find talks about the origin of childhood anemia. It is multifactorial, encompassing both nutritional differences and social and economic determinants. Despite the EMTANA implemented policies, the prevalence of it remained high, requiring comprehensive approaches. Where is it published? It is published in the repository continental.edu.pe. Moving on to the third theory, it is by Questhart, Orengofo, Reynos, Calderon, Roger, and this was published in 2021, which is an article. The title of the research is Dietary Intake, Intestinal Infection, and Safe Drinking Water in Children with Anemia in Peru. So, Ikila, This is a cross-sectional analysis. The theoretical contribution, it talks about childhood anemia. It is also associated with dietary intake, infections, and water quality. Where is it published? It is published in BCMC Nutrition.
In design and type of research, we have that the study was developed under a quantitative approach because we worked with numerical data such as the frequency of consumption of iron-rich foods and hemoglobin values. It is basic in type as it understood the relationship between these two important variables for child health. In the research design, a non-experimental and cross-sectional design was used, meaning non-experimental because we did not manipulate any variables, the reality was observed as it occurs, and cross-sectional because we collected the data at a single point in time. Since the variables were observed in their natural context and at a single moment, they were without external interventions. The scope of the research is descriptive and correlational. Descriptive because it describes how the consumption of iron-rich foods is in children, and correlational because it analyzed if there is a relationship between such consumption and anemia levels. In the variables, we have two variables. First variable, consumption of iron-rich foods, and second variable, the state of anemia. In the first variable, which is the consumption of iron-rich foods, according to the concept of the World Health Organization, the consumption of iron-rich foods is essential to prevent anemia. In the operational objective, it was measured through a survey applied to the mothers, where 3 dimensions were selected. The first dimension was the frequency of consumption. As an indicator, it was established how many times per week they consumed iron-rich foods. In the second dimension, it was the type of food. The indicator was the foods consumed: offal, red meats, legumes, green vegetables. And as a third point, absorption enhancers as an indicator if accompanied by foods that promote absorption, such as fruits rich in vitamin C. In the mediation scale, it was ordinal with options like never, rarely, sometimes, almost, always, always. In variable 2, anemia status, the concept according to the Ministry of Health, anemia is a hemoglobin concentration of less than 11 grams per deciliter. The progressional objective was evaluated through the latest hemoglobin records of the children reported by the mother or by their health facility checkup. The dimension used was hemoglobin as an indicator. The hemoglobin value was used in grams per deciliter. For the population in the sample, it varies on age, the techniques and instruments for data collection, applied analysis techniques. We have that the population consisted of 36 children aged 3 to 5 years enrolled in the educational institution Villa San Isidro. The sample consisted of 35 children, calculated using the formula for finite population, considering a 95% confidence level and a 5% margin of error. As a result, a sample of 35 participants was determined, selected through convenience sampling based on the accessibility and availability of the parents or guardians. All participants took part with their parents' authorization. The ethical principles of research were strictly adhered to. Authorization was managed with the educational institution, and informed consent was obtained from parents and/or guardians. Likewise, the reliability of the information was ensured, using it exclusively for academic and scientific purposes. Finally, the data were processed using specialized statistical software. In the data collection techniques and instruments, the technique used was the survey. In the instruments, a structured questionnaire on food consumption was applied to the guardians, which allowed obtaining quantifiable information on the frequency of iron-rich food consumption. For hemoglobin, a record sheet was used based on the last checkup reported by the caregivers themselves or by the health facility. This instrument ensured precision, uniformity, and ease for subsequent statistical analysis. The validity and reliability were measured by a Cronbach's alpha of 0.97. The instruments were validated by 3 experts in nutrition and public health. They showed good consistency and clarity. In the data analysis techniques, we use descriptive and correlational statistics to determine if iron consumption is related to anemia levels in children under 5 years old in Villa San Isidro. In the following table, we present the category of consumption of iron-rich foods. Here, the subcategories are detailed based on concepts from the World Health Organization, which states that consuming iron-rich foods, especially of animal origin, is essential to prevent childhood anemia. In the first subcategory, sources of animal-based iron include foods that provide iron such as liver, blood sausage, red meat, chicken, fish, and eggs. The indicators I use show the weekly frequency with which children consume these foods, the inclusion of organ meats in the diet, and how many times per week they consume meat, fish, or chicken. This part is key because animal iron is better absorbed in the body. In the second subcategory, plant-based iron sources include plant foods rich in iron like lentils, spinach, and leafy green vegetables. The indicators evaluate how many times per week the child consumes legumes, if meals include spinach or other green vegetables, and if there is regular consumption of vegetables. Although plant-based iron is absorbed less, it is still important in the diet. In the third category, we have enhancers of iron absorption. We evaluate the family to see if they correctly combine iron-rich foods with foods high in vitamin C. The indicators measure whether the child accompanies their meals with citrus fruits such as oranges, tangerines, which help absorb iron better. This is very important because even if you consume iron, if you don't combine it well, the body doesn't utilize it. In the fourth category, we have family food practices, analyzing the habits and practices of the family that can influence the child's nutrition. The indicators that influence the variety of foods available at home, access to foods rich in iron, dietary preferences, whether of the family, and if they have received nutritional education, as these factors imply why some family members consume more iron than others.
Table 1. Identify the frequency of anemia in this age group in Villa San Isidro. In Table 1, it was observed that out of 35 children, 60% had anemia, showing that is a common problem in the child community. In relation to the first objective, high anemia was found among the children, especially those who were more vulnerable, which requires greater prevention from early childhood. Table 2. Describe the intake for iron-rich foods in this population. Table 2 showed that children consume few iron-rich foods, especially meat, organ meat, and fish, while chicken and eggs are consumed more frequently. Regarding the second objective, the consumption of gene iron foods was low, and the limited nutritional education and scarce resources affected the children's nutritional quality. Table 3. Establishing the relationship between the frequency of consumption of the foods and hemoglobin levels. Table 3. It was shown that higher iron consumption was related to better hemoglobin levels, while lower consumption was associated with more anemia. The third objective confirmed that higher iron consumption improves hemoglobin levels, and that combining it with vitamin C enhances its absorption. Table 4 propose recommendations aimed at strengthening local anemia prevention strategies. In Table 4, 60% of the children had anemia, and a diet low in iron affected their hemoglobin levels. So preventive measures are recommended. It's on the fourth objective. Comprehensive and shocks are suggested to prevent anemia in Villa San Isidro, involving families, schools, and health services.
Conclusion. It is recommended to complement studying with a qualitative method and to use qualitative experiment or longitudinal design to best evaluate intervention against anemia. It is also suggested establishing nutritional monitoring system for children in Villa San Isidro and to analyze local results in order to adapt prevention strategies appropriate to the community context. Recommendation. It is recommended to improve anemia. Research be using more comprehensive method implement intervention that can be evaluated or team established nutritional. Monitoring for children and adapt action according to local needs and resources.